All right, so welcome to everybody to today's Lunch and Learn series. This is all about getting yourself organized for the new year. Today's session is all about a business tune-up that Kathleen Thompson and I will be co-teaching. And I'm Steve Mahoney. We are both mentors with the Greater Hartford chapter of SCORE. So Kathleen, we did a brief poll here. What does the poll tell us about our attendance today?
Poll tells us that it's a split between startup, growing, and mature. 20% are mature. Everybody else is either startup or growing. We have a very large contingent of professional/service. That's 75%, with the rest saying they're other. And 85% of the attendees today are full-time with their business, with the rest split. So it's predominantly people where this is their full-time gig. Oh, and one more. How do you plan for your business at the beginning of the year? The largest group is they have a documented list of goals. The second largest is informal goals in your head. 15% say I have a business plan, and 10% do not plan.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's good to know. That's good background information. So thanks, everybody, for taking some time to answer that. I think we can close out the poll here. Go from there. All right. And one last thing, we are recording this session today. You'll get a link to this recording tomorrow. And if you haven't signed up for the other 3 classes in the series, you can still do so on our website. And you'll also get a link to sign up for those in the email that you get tomorrow with the recording. So let's jump into today's topic. So we're 3 weeks into the new year, and everybody knows what that usually means in January. It's New Year's resolution time. Now, typically, I know if you're like me, resolutions last maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months, but they typically drift away. And, you kind of lose sight of it and you don't stick to it. And then you kind of go through the same cycle a year from now. Now, we purposely scheduled this series at the beginning of the year, not because we want to add to your New Year's resolutions, but we did this because we thought it was a good time to help you get off the year on the right foot. You've got the entirety of 2024 ahead of you. So we're going to help you not do a resolution that's going to fall apart in a few weeks, but also we're instead trying to get you the habits and the goals and the tasks ahead of you to really make the most of this year. Now, you may be like Calvin here, telling his buddy Hobbs that he doesn't need any resolutions because he's perfect the way I am. I highly doubt any of you are like that, or else you wouldn't be here. But I found this too funny not to share because I always loved Calvin and Hobbs. All right, so where do you start when you're doing this business tune-up? In order to know where you're going, you have to know where you are. So what I've outlined here are kind of a concept of doing an assessment of your business. Thinking about this as I'm not a car guy, so this may be a bad analogy, but as you think about going in to take your car in for service, they're not just going to look at, do you have enough air in your tires? They're going to look at all aspects of your car. And with that, you're going to want to think about the same thing for your business. You want to think about the landscape of your business across all these various categories here, and how you're feeling about it. Now, there's different ways you can assess your business that I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes. But as you look through these categories, it covers pretty much a wide variety of things that you'd have to think about with your business. So I always start with product and service differentiation because that is the key to any business's success. Is your product or service differentiating enough against the competition in terms of what's out there? And this is something that you have to look at least once a year, if not more often. We've got price competitiveness because your product may be heavily dependent upon how a customer values it in terms of price, how you do marketing to your target customers, how you do making the sale. And, once you make the sale, how do you service your customers on an ongoing basis? And then you got some of the back office function, like managing your finances, managing your team of employees or contractors, if you're using outside contractors. Then you've got some of the things that aren't so much fun, but are important, like compliance and legal. And then there's also business planning and then just assessing your business strategy and revising that as you need to. Now, these are just broad categories. You may need to think about some more specific questions underneath each category. So for instance, when you look at your marketing activity and making the sale, ask yourself how good you are at making your sales pitch. Do you have a good, 30-second pitch, 5-minute pitch, 30-minute presentation, depending upon your situation? As you think about price competitiveness, maybe you say, well, my price is in line with my competition, but how are your negotiating skills? If a client comes back and says, I want something a little bit cheaper, are you willing to do that? And then in terms of customer service, do you have a process in place to respond to customer inquiries timely? Whether that's text or phone call or email, do you have a process and the right support system to do that? So there's a number of different questions you can ask yourself when you're doing this. And then you want to say to yourself, all right, how do I do this? Well, I'm going to give you a couple different options here. The first is you could create, if you're a numbers person like me, you may say, I want something a little quantifiable. So help me put some numbers around this so that I can say, is it kind of good, medium, or bad? And so what I did here is I just created a simple Excel spreadsheet, and I'm calling it a diagnostic dashboard. And what you could do here is I said to myself, all right, I'm going to take each of these key categories and ask myself maybe a couple questions underneath each category. And I'm going to rate myself on two scales. One would be importance. How important is this category or question to my business being successful? And the other is capability, meaning how good am I at this? And for each one of these, I said I'm going to rank it 1 to 5, and then I'm going to multiply one times the other, and I'm going to come up with a product in the right column. And then I set up a little conditional formatting in Excel that basically says if it's green, yellow, or red, depending upon where it falls in the scale. And if it's below a certain number, in this example, I said if it's below 10, it's going to be green. I can basically ignore it. If it's, in that middle range, maybe I need to do something about it. And if it's red, I definitely need to do something about it. So this would be just an example of if you say to yourself, I know there's a lot of things out there about my business. How do I put some kind of math around it to help guide me in the right way? Now, I came up with these questions on my own. You could come up with your own questions. I've got a score tool in a minute that may help you with that as well. But let's just look at this as an example. So in the first one, I've got, under the category of product differentiation, my question is, how unique is my product compared to the competition? Well, in the importance rating, I'm going to say that's pretty high. So I'm going to give that a 5. And in capability, I think, maybe I'm doing okay. Could be better, could be worse. So I'm going to give it a 3. That's kind of right in the middle. 5 times 3 is 15. That falls in my yellow bucket. So maybe that's something I need to focus on with some level of effort. But the house is not on fire when it comes to that issue. You're looking at price competitiveness. Let's look at this one. How are your price negotiation skills? Maybe your business is not necessarily that commoditized, so price isn't necessarily that important to your customers. So we're going to call your importance rating, 2, because it's on the lower end. But also, you're really good at it when it does come up. So that equates to a 4. That's green. I'm not going to necessarily worry about it. Then we got this one, in the marketing section. How well defined is your target customer? Super important for just about every business, knowing who you're trying to find as a customer. But let's say this is something that you really had a hard time figuring out. Maybe you're marketing to people, but they're not in the right place. And maybe you're asking yourself, am I too narrow? Am I too broad? So you're going to give yourself a 4 because you're on the kind of poor end of that one. So when I multiply those together, you can see I've got a score of 20, which is in that red zone. And that may be something you really need to focus on. So when you're doing an exercise like this, it's a little bit tough because you're judging yourself. My advice to people is try to be as balanced as you can in this. Don't be, Pollyannish and be too, think that everything's going great, but also don't be too hard on yourself. There are some things you're probably doing pretty well as you're looking through this. Another thing you could do is you look back at your goals from maybe a year ago for 2023, or if you did a business plan, like a few of you did, take that, dust those off and say, how did I do against those? That may help you inform where you are in the scale of these different topics. Now, if you ask yourself, wow, this seems like a great exercise, how do I answer some of these questions? We actually have a really good tool in Score that we're going to send you a link to afterwards. You can fill this out yourself. This is an excerpt from the tool. It's called a business need assessment tool. And basically, there's 30 different questions across the 6 categories that you can see listed on the right. And what I've got here in the general management, which is one of the categories, is just an example of the 5 questions in that category. So I just made up these answers for this class, but are you happy with the current performance of your business? Yes or no? Do you have detailed goals? Yes or no? Do you have a business? Does your business have a business plan? Does your business have a strategic plan? Does your business have a vision and or mission statement? So I just made up answers to these 5 questions, and you can see that it calculates a score for you based on that. When you get through all of those 30 questions, there's actually a tool at the end that says, depending upon where your total score lands in these ranges, here's how to think about the status of your, business assessment. So this might be a good tool for you to use to A, do that numerical assessment, but B, to also come up with some key questions that you might not have thought about. The other nice way you can use this tool is that this could, if you're working with a score mentor, this could be a good thing for the two of you to work on together to say, hey, I've done this assessment. What do you think? And if they have been working with you, they may be able to give you some input if they agree or disagree with how you scored yourself. And then also that can help shape where you may want to focus your attention on some of these aspects going into your business, because this gives you the how well are you doing on these various items, but there's that importance aspect as well. So you may find a couple of these questions that you are not good at per se, but maybe they're not as critical for your business, so you don't need to do anything about them right away. So that's just an example of that. And again, we'll send you a link to this tool when we send out the link for the recording tomorrow. So another great tool that I've encouraged business owners to work with is what's called a SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Many companies do this. It's a good way for you to take a step back and say, what's the state of my business and what are the things I need to focus on? Now, this graphic that I got here is from an article by the gentleman by the name of Dan Schuin. It's called How to Do a SWOT Analysis. I found this recently and I found it very valuable. He gives some great examples in his article. We're going to send you a link to his article. He's not affiliated with SCORE. It's just a resource that we found online. But we wanted to give him credit for this because we think this is pretty helpful. So let's just talk about what a SWOT analysis is. So the first two items are strengths and weaknesses. So there's a little bit of a description here at the beginning, right? Strengths is things your company does well, qualities that separate you from your competitors, and then it gives some examples, right? Could be internal resources or tangible assets such as intellectual property. Weaknesses are things that your company lacks, right? It's kind of the opposite of the strengths, or things that your competitors do better than you. So, for here's an example of unclear, unique selling proposition. Opportunities, these are mostly just examples, right? So in here, he's got maybe there's an opportunity because there's underserved markets for your specific product. Maybe there's an emerging need for your product. And then in threats might be, a changing regulatory environment or negative press or media coverage. So as you're thinking about this analysis, there's a lens from which I would recommend you look at this, and that's the fact that strengths and weaknesses are largely influenced by internal factors. So these are things that you are really good at or that you need to improve on. So think about that internal lens. Opportunities and threats are more influenced by external factors. What's going on with your competition? What's going on with the general business market, the general economy, the regulatory environment? So think about that through the external lens. So you could do this analysis, and you don't really need a fancy template for this one. You can find one online. I think Dan's article actually has some examples in there. And then you ask yourself, all right, I'm going to do this. Now, what do I do with it? And that's what we're going to talk about in this next slide here. So this is a SWOT analysis that I made up just completely out of thin air for a financial services business called the Financial Fixers. And they went through this and they just started jotting down some different strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. And I want to give you some examples of kind of how you may want to look through this. There's some key questions you're going to ask yourself as you go through this exercise. So in their example, they started with their strengths, and they've got, proprietary consulting tools. They've got a great industry experience, loyalty from their customers. They got a good brand. They're passionate about their industry. When I look at their weaknesses, they've got some stagnant sales and profit. Their absolute profit margin's kind of low. They've been losing some clients with price negotiations, and they've got low employee morale. So they're kind of wrestling with those things. On the opportunity side, they do see still high demand for financial consulting services. So there is a market out there for what they offer. And with the technology that they've got, they can do online consulting. So that might be a selling point for customers who are looking to do something quick online and not travel into their office. And also, there's been a new IRA tax law that they can offer some services on, which might provide a new revenue stream. And then in terms of threats, they've got a new competitor that just opened up. They're offering lower prices, and they're hiring people with a more competitive salary than what they're offering at the Financial Fixers. And they've also been a little bit worried about cyber hacks and about kind of what to do about it. So this is their SWOT analysis. Now, if I had a client come back to me, I might say, all right, let's take a look at this and ask ourselves what it tells us. The first thing that I would do as I'm going through this is ask myself, have we captured everything correctly, and are we labeling everything kind of the right way? And the first thing that would jump out to me is this strength here that says passionate about the industry or passionate about their business. There's one thing that Kathleen and I have always found is that every business owner is passionate about their business. Now, when you think about a strength for your business, you want to think about something that differentiates you from your competitor. Being passionate about your business is not a differentiator. So I would suggest that this come off the list because it's kind of giving you a false sense of security. That's not really going to be something that's going to benefit you. The next thing I would say is, well, how do we leverage strengths and capitalize on opportunities, leveraging some of these strengths that we have and capitalize on the opportunities that are in the market? So, for instance, we got this opportunity here that says we can get additional services from new IRA tax laws. Let's figure out how to do that. Well, you've got strong customer loyalty. You've got a lot of your clients who maybe been with you several years. They're always responsive. They're always looking for advice. That might be your best way to upsell into them with this new service because they know you and you know them, and they value what you bring to the market. So leveraging a strength and capitalizing on opportunity is another way to take advantage of this SWOT analysis. The other thing you may want to look at is when you come up with your threats or you do kind of a risk assessment for your business, one thing you're going to find is that you can't address every risk or every threat that's out there. You have to do an assessment to say to yourself, how am I going to figure out what are the things I need to focus on? And you may find that there are certain things out there that they're not super important or they're not super risky, but you probably need to get a little bit smarter on them. So maybe you don't need to drop everything and do something about it now, but maybe it's something you want to monitor. And this cyber hacks would be a good example because it's something you're a little bit worried about and you think, maybe I'm going to put on my goal list for sometime in 2024 to do an assessment of my business for cyber hacks, but I don't need to drop everything and do it now because it's not, a burning issue. I bring this issue up, purposely because we do have a cybersecurity class coming up in this series. So that one was top of mind as I was thinking through this. The other, probably the most important thing as you're thinking through a SWOT analysis is thinking if you've got correlated weaknesses and threats. And what I mean by that are, weaknesses could be a problem if you don't do anything about that immediately. If you've got a threat that is in that same category and a competitor could come in and capitalize on your weakness, just like you're going to try to use your strength to capitalize on an opportunity, a competitor could come in if they're a threat to you and they capitalize on your weakness, that's something you're going to want to do something about immediately. So in this example, I've got a competitor who's coming in, they're offering lower prices than you, and they're offering better salaries than some of their employees. Well, you've got an issue here because you're also got a low profit margin and you've been having some price negotiation trouble, and you've got some employees who are on low morale. That's kind of a recipe for disaster here. So if you've got an example like this where you think, wow, not only do we have this weakness, but we've got a kind of competitor coming in who's better at some of these things than we are, we've got to figure out a new strategy. Now, what to do about that could differentiate things, right? You could say, how do we, think about working on a different service plan with our clients? Do we think about rebranding or maybe offering different package pricing for our services? How are we thinking about addressing our employee morale? Do we need to reorganize some things, create some efficiencies in how we're running the business with who's doing what in terms of the office? So that's just an example of how you can use a tool like this so that when you get the strengths and opportunities and weaknesses and threats on the page, you can ask yourself, like, what do you do with it? Ask yourself if it's telling you a certain story and how some of these things across the different boxes may be correlated and may tell you a story that think about some action plans to what to do next. So with that, I am done with my section, and Kathleen is going to take the ball from here and tell you where to go next. So Kathleen, I'm going to stop sharing and you can pick it up from here.
Great. Okay. So as Steve was alluding to earlier, the SWOT is what gives you all the possible strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you can choose what to do out of any one of those categories. You can capitalize on your strengths, or you could try to offset your weaknesses. You could capitalize on your opportunities, or you could offset your threats. What's important now is to remember that your time is finite, and so less is more. And you can see in the diagram, the left diagram, if I spread myself too thin, I have nothing to show for my efforts. And on the right side, if I choose one thing to focus on first, now I have clear progress all the way to completion, and it's a good feeling when I'm done. And all of us are a lot more likely to get things done this way. In fact, you're more likely to get all of them done this way than if you try to do it the other way. Partly because every time you switch from one context to another, you lose 20% of your productivity every time. So every time your focus goes, oh, I'm going to work on project 2 instead of project 1, 20% reduction in productivity. So you can't afford that kind of time loss in your projects. And so what you want to do is have one. Now, I say one, but really I don't mean one. And I'll explain that in just a minute. What you want to do is you want to, as you're choosing, you want to choose what's going to bring you the highest value. And then when you finish what you think is going to produce the highest value, then you repeat the analysis and move on to the next one. And I'll show you what that looks like. It looks like this. Now, this is not the same business that Steve was talking about. This is not a financial business. This is a business that sells products that are food related, because you can see that one of the projects is to share recipes. This is the easiest way I know to compare options. And you can see that one of my goals for this is to increase sales to existing customers, and another goal is to get new customers. And so what I've done is, just like Steve, I like spreadsheets. So I made a spreadsheet that ranks each of the possible things I might do to either increase the sales to existing customers or get new ones. And and then I total up the columns, and the ones with the lowest score are better. So the less effort gets a lower number. The more impact, because impact is a good thing, gets a higher number. Excuse me, gets a lower number. So good is always lower. So high impact, low number. Low effort, low costs, low time, low number. So you can see with the 4 choices that one of them, new product, has the highest impact, I believe. However, it also is going to take the most effort and take the longest to pull off. And so in my mind, when I weigh all of those things, I say to myself, what do I think could have the next highest impact and take less time and effort than that one? And it's going to be the one at the bottom, which says referral program, is going to give me the next highest impact. And then the one that's got the 8 that's circled has a moderate amount of impact, and it will I could really pull it off quickly. So what I might choose to do is say, I've weighed all these factors. I want a decent amount of impact. I don't want my impact to be 5. But if it's 2 or 3, that's not bad. And if I can do it really quickly and have that going, then I can also spend time on the other one. So in my mind, what I would do in this scenario is I would say, my new product project is going to be on the list and is going to be considered the long project. So I'm going to, when I have a couple minutes here or there, I'm going to work on it and not expect it to get done anytime soon. I'm going to put very little effort on it. I'm only going to really work on it when my brain is fried from doing my primary project, or I reach a stopping point where something is with someone else and they haven't gotten it back to me yet. And so I've got downtime. So I generally have 2 projects going at any given time, one of which is my secondary that I only do when I have extra time, and the one that's my primary that I really give it all my focus. So my circle would look like one big long arrow with a little tiny arrow next to it to say, this is my other project. Now, once you have your SWOT which then led to your projects. Now I want to talk about how might you address the weaknesses or the threats, because those projects were opportunities for growth that you saw on the previous slide. So you might add a project for training or researching cost-effective outsourcing to address your weaknesses or threats if you can't deal with them yourself. And this, whatever this is that you want to call this opportunity to address your weaknesses and threats, might not make the level of a project. So it might not end up going on your evaluation tool. But if it's big, if it requires a long-term commitment with a lot of effort on your part, then you might want to put it there. And that's why I'm mentioning it, because these things were all positive growth, direct growth related projects, but you might have another one that is addressing your weakness or your threat. And here, when you are evaluating the impact to your business, you might want to evaluate it based on the reduction of the weakness or the threat, as opposed to the increase in sales or profit margin. Now, one thing that Steve did mention briefly, and I want to stress again, is this. Is there any way that you can use your strengths and your opportunities to possibly offset a weakness or threat? For example, can you turn a strength into a superpower? And can you double down on that so the weakness or the threat has less impact than it otherwise might? And this is kind of nuanced, and this isn't easy to think up for yourself. We tend to get a little bit of blinders when it's our own business, and it's really easy to see it in other people's businesses. So what I would suggest is that if there's someone either who's your partner, your business partner, or a trusted colleague, somebody who's also in business who you trust quite a bit, or your score mentor, if there's someone who can do this with you, that they might see things you can't, it might be helpful to you, because trying to do this alone might be a bit much, especially if the person has a different perspective than you. And if you have a score mentor or anyone else going to help you, you could do all that pre-work, a SWOT, and then say, okay, here are my super strengths. How can I turn them into superpowers? And come with some stuff to bring to talk about, as opposed to just starting the whole thing from scratch with somebody else. It helps if you bring something first. All right, so now that you've done all that, you've done your SWOT, and so now you've created projects. Now what you want to do is you want to update your business plan, assuming that you have one, with any of your new projects. And this might be if you expect your revenues to increase, or you expect to cut expenses by some way, or you're going to increase expenses because you're going to be creating something new and you need to outsource that work, or you need to front the inventory, whatever it happens to be. And also milestones, like when do you expect something to happen? And if it's a new product like this one happens to be, then what are your marketing activities going to be to make sure that this happens? So whatever on your business plan is going to be affected by the project or projects, you want to update at this time. And Steve, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say about this at this point.
No, I think you've captured it.
Okay. Now, if you don't have a business plan, then, and you have some of the other methods that you said you had, like you have a list of tasks, you have a list of projects, you have stuff in your head, I would encourage you to get stuff out of your head and put it down somewhere, because balancing all that in your head gets complicated over time, and it takes up space in your head that would be well used in doing something a little bit more creative other than trying to remember. So tasks are how we get things done. You can simply make a list of tasks. If you take the middle column here on this little chart, that is the list of tasks. Now, I took it 2 steps further and I said, I'm going to prioritize my tasks between A and B on the left And I'm going to number them on the right in the order that they have to happen because one thing is dependent on another. You don't have to get that fancy if you don't want to. You could simply list them. And how you list them is totally up to you. Piece of paper, Post-it note, notes app on your phone, whatever you choose to do, a project management software if you want to get fancy. You just want to have your tasks somewhere other than your brain. And then once you have them listed, now you're going to schedule them and you're going to assign them. Now, if you're the only person in your business, you're assigning them to yourself. If you're not the only person in your business, you're going to assign them to yourself and whoever you have working with you. And then what you want to do is have regular project sessions to look at the status and clear any roadblocks that have come up. Because the faster you can address roadblocks, the more quickly your project gets back on track. Now, here's another option if you don't like listing things in a lot of detail. You could simply put a high-level list together, which is when I had my tasks, I had 7 tasks, and they were all about one thing I was doing. I could simply say decision new product as priority number 1. And I know that that's got a whole bunch of steps associated with it, but I'm not listing them all. And then when I go to my calendar, that's where I actually list them. And I just put them on my calendar when I think I'm going to do them. So if for example, if decision my new product was first and source the produce was second, et cetera, then I say, okay, there are how many steps associated with decisioning my new product? I'm going to just go straight to my calendar. And I'm going to say the first one's going to get done in the next 2 days. And then the next one will be done a week after that. And then I'll have the decision made in a week and a half, et cetera, et cetera. And so you just stick it on your calendar for when you want to do the work and you skip the step in the middle. Now, I prefer to use the previous option because it keeps everything in one place. And even though it's a little bit repetitive when I end up putting things on my calendar too, I think it's more clear because at least I have them all in one place and I can check them off when they're done. And I don't know about you, but I feel really good when I can check things off when they're done. Now, this is something that you would not think would be true, but it is. And some people actually say when you're thinking of doing something and you're planning on doing something, keep it a secret. And that's not exactly what we mean, but what we mean is when you tell your friends what you're planning to do, it can backfire on you. There's all kinds of studies showing this to be the case. You would think if I share it with my friends, they're going to encourage me along the way. Well, there's 2 reasons not to do this. The first is that you kind of get the emotional reward of doing the work as if you did the work by sharing that you're going to do it with your friends. The second thing is that your friends might try to talk you out of it because they see you a certain way. Unless they're also in business and they're also taking the risks that you're taking every day and busting your butt like you are every day, unless they're a lot like you in the first place, in which case that's a little different, they might see you a certain way, or they might think it's too hard, or they might think it's too weird, and they might try to talk you out of it. So your best bet is to only share at the beginning to those who will or might at least work with you to get it done. So for example, a SCORE mentor, a business coach, a business networking group, a couple people that you meet with regularly to share like a mastermind, something like that, where you know people are either going to help you directly or they're going to help you by encouraging you and calling you on whatever they see, the baloney they see happening when you're not getting stuff done. And so you want to do the work in secret and then share it when it's done. And you could say, hey, I've been working on this really cool thing all this time. Another option you have is if you're big onto social media, You can share it as you do the work, but only after the portion is done. So in other words, it's the same thing. You don't want too many attaboys or attagirls when you've only done like 5% of the work, because then you feel like, oh my gosh, I feel awesome. And then it's less likely you'll actually do it. So it's hard enough, as you all know, if you've been in business for any length of time, it's hard enough to kind of work through the hard stuff. And then if you do things that are going to shoot you in the foot, so to speak, so that you end up not doing it, then that's what you don't want to have happen. And so the question is then, how do you stay motivated when it's hard? If you're not talking to people who are just your random friends about it because you realize that it's going to help you not accomplish the work, then how do you keep going when you feel down on yourself, or when it's just getting too hard and you think you can't make it? Well, the more you can turn what it is you want to do into a mission, the better off you are. And what I mean by that is it's something really important to you, and it's not just the thing you're working on, the project you're working on, then it's helpful. If you can see it as almost like a life's mission, almost like a bigger cause that you can participate in. If you think of the cause as being this massive flow of energy and effort going into all these people around the world trying to make this cause better, whatever it happens to be, whether it's environmental, whether it's how people treat each other, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's I'm tired of people in this economic strata never having the same chances that people in another economic group have, whatever it happens to be, if you can say that your mission is to help that succeed, that thing that's big, you know in your lifetime it's never going to be finished. You know in your lifetime you might only move a certain amount, but you are going to move it some. It's not going to stay stagnant or get worse if you have anything to do about it. The more you can see your work that way, the more you're likely to keep going when it gets really hard, which is why you only want to share your plans in advance with the people who are going to help you remember that and keep going and remind you of your mission. All right. So that was a lot to absorb all at one time. And so we have tools that we will share with you when this workshop is over. You'll get an email tomorrow with a link to the replay so you can listen to it again. You will see the tools that we will send to you, so that if you want to click on anything and you want to go out to these tools yourself and use them for yourself, you're welcome to. One of the things we want to make sure is that when you attend any kind of a workshop, that you actually take action on the things that you wanted to learn about. And the best way to do that is to practice right away. So go out, watch the replay if you want to, get the tools, start working on them, whichever one or ones appeal to you the most, or seem to address what your issues are the most, or your questions the most. Go ahead and do that. Another thing you can do is you can get a mentor if you don't already have a SCORE mentor. And so Steve is going to put up a poll asking you, do you have a mentor? And if yes, great. Then what you might want to do is address some of these topics with your mentor. If you don't have a SCORE mentor and you would like one, then you just have to say yes to the second question, and we will contact you today and tell you how you can get a mentor. If you don't want a mentor, that's fine. If you have other people you're working with, or you prefer to do things yourself, whatever you want is fine with us. We just want to offer the opportunity for you to work with a mentor if you so desire. So as a reminder, we are going to go to Q&A now, and you feel free. We leave plenty of time for you to ask all kinds of questions about your specific circumstances, because we want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you haven't already, feel free to go to the question and answer box and type in your question, and Steve and I will answer it to the best of our ability. If you want to reserve it until after the recording is completed because there's something confidential about your question, then simply say so, and we will save it until after we end the recording. And so with that, we'll go to the Q&A.
All right, thanks, Kathleen. We don't have anything in there right now. We did have one of the participants, Dean, raised his hand. Dean, if you could try to put your question in the Q&A box, we'll try to address it there. If we can't, maybe we can unmute your microphone. But if anybody else has a question, feel free to add that to the Q&A box and we can go from there. And also, to Kathleen's point about the mentoring, I saw a number of you responded. I'll reach out to you later today with instructions on how to sign up for a SCORE Mentor. And it's worth noting that we will not bludgeon you with emails. So it'll just be kind of a once email to tell you how to do it. And then if you want to do that, that'd be great. And now we can go from there. All right, let's see. So we got a question from Adrian. How would you recommend working on multiple business plans?
You want to take that, or do you want?
I can take it. I mean, Adrian, I'm assuming you mean for like maybe you've got a product business or a service business, or you're trying to explore different ideas and you're not quite sure which business you want to go into. If that's the direction you're going, I'll answer it that way. If it's something different, please chime in. But and Kathleen, I'm interested in your perspective on this. My advice to clients when they're thinking through this is to start with the one-page business plan, which you shared briefly on the one of your earlier slides, and we're going to send everyone a link to that, is to start with that because it's short, it's pretty simple, and it helps get your thoughts organized around what you want to do. And if you've got a couple different ideas, if you do that one pager, it's not going to take you a ton of time. It's not like a 30-page business plan. And if you want to try to use that one-page business plan and say, I'm going to do this for my idea for a daycare business, and do all the aspects of that. And then, you know, if you've got another idea where it's maybe you want to open up a consulting business, or maybe you want to, you know, manufacture, you know, soaps and lotions, things like that. So doing a one-page business plan helps you get your thoughts organized without it being a ton of work. And then you can kind of compare and contrast your different ideas. I think that's what you were getting at based on your response here. It says if you have multiple business ideas at one time. So hopefully that helps. Kathleen, anything you add or modify?
I think the only thing I would add is that, as Steve said, the best time to deal with multiple business ideas is before you start actually working on any one of them. Or if you've started working on one and you're not sure if it's the right thing because you've come up with some other ideas in the meantime. It's not optimal to actually start multiple businesses at the same time. And that's because of that diagram I showed where you've got the circle with a bunch of arrows going in a bunch of different directions. Starting a business is challenging. Starting multiple businesses is infinitely challenging. It's another thing if you start one and it's running on autopilot and you have someone else who can manage it, and then you want to start a second one. But it's definitely not optimal to start more than one at the same time. So you want to do this while you're doing the analysis up front, and then choose and then move forward with one, at least in the beginning, until it's well underway.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes sense. And Adrian added, if you're certain you want to open those businesses, okay, that makes sense. So I think we hit that one okay. All right, so we have a question from Marnie here. I'm just starting out. When I do a SWOT analysis at this point, the strengths and weaknesses will likely be my personal strengths and weaknesses at this point, correct? You want to take this one?
I think that is correct. Yeah, it is correct. It's not necessarily your personality strengths and weaknesses, although that may come into play, but it's going to be the strengths and weaknesses that you possess, either internal to you as a person, or how much financial resources you do have or don't have, or the skill you do or don't have for the numerous things you need to do to run your business when it gets started. So for example, if you're really good at coming up with a product and marketing is not your strong suit, then it's going to be a strength and a weakness. If bookkeeping is a challenge and don't know anything about accounting, yes. So it's going to be skills, it's going to be tools, it's going to be money, it's going to be all the things that you have at your disposal that you can use or not use for your business, as opposed to things that are outside of you, like the market is too small, or I don't have enough social media followers, or something like that that's external to you. And hopefully that helps. And Steve, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I agree. I think the key thing about that is when I was going through the SWOT analysis, I mentioned that strengths and weaknesses are really about the internal aspects of you and your business, whereas opportunities and threats are more of that external lens. And Kathleen's point is right. It's really got to be the strengths and weaknesses that are closely aligned to your business and what they're going to contribute to your business's success. So as Kathleen started answering, I was thinking like my quick response would be, it doesn't mean that you have a good sense of humor, right? Unless you're a comedian, if that's your business. But also keep in mind the strengths of being something that will help differentiate your business. So, if you have a strength that says like, well, I work really hard or I'm passionate about my business, I mean, that may help you, but it's not going to be a differentiator. So just keep that in mind as you're going through that exercise. So hopefully that helped, Marnie.
On the other hand, if you're passionate about helping other people to the point where your customer service is second to none, now your strength is my customer service is second to none.
Right.
So your personality that says I'm passionate about what I do translates into something that's tangible, that's a strength that you can turn to. Because customer service for any of us who live in the real world, no, it's pretty bad, pretty much across the board. And the attitude that we get in a lot of cases coming our way is often like, you're a number, we don't care much about you. So anytime you are super personal, super helpful, and I don't mean be a doormat, but I mean go out of your way to be responsive, that goes a long way, and that's something you can definitely measure as a strength.
Yeah, and it's also important to think through that strength and weaknesses, thinking about the importance of it to your business. So for instance, if you're a service business and you run a consulting business, or, let's say you're a massage therapist or a physical therapist, your service is everything you provide. So having strong customer service recognition from your clients is super important. If you sell a product that is somewhat of a commodity, price may be more important than, customer service. They may just be thinking about, can I get this as cheap as possible? And can they ship it to me fast? And is the quality really good as a product? They still want good service because they want you to be responsive and take your order correctly and everything. But the quality of the product and the price may be more of a differentiator than the actual service you provide. So that's where it really comes down to understanding your target customer and what they want and need out of your product, and also what your competition is doing along those same lines.
I just have a funny story to tell you guys that I read this article yesterday. I was cracking up. So this company in the UK decided to utilize an AI chatbot to save money on its customer service. And so one of the customers was trying to get a problem resolved. And so they went to this chatbot and they started typing with the chatbot. And they wanted a customer service number to call because the problem was so serious that they knew they needed to speak to a person. And the chatbot was not providing the information. So they actually chatted with the thing long enough to get the chatbot to swear at the customer and write a poem about how it was the worst customer service ever. And so the business shut the chatbot down the next hour or day or something like that. I was laughing, going, yeah, I bet that's just, and now it's plastered all over the internet. So now everybody knows how bad this company is. So when we say customer service matters, we're not kidding, because Somebody used a chat bot to their advantage.
Sometimes technology can't solve everything, right?
I know.
That's funny.
Yeah.
All right. We still have a few minutes left. If anybody else has any other questions, we don't have any open ones right now. All right. Just got to thank you from Candy. You're welcome. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions, Kathleen. I'm coming up
All
on 1
right.
o'clock in a few minutes. We could probably wrap it up. You want to take it away?
All right. Well, we want to thank you so much for coming today. We want to thank you for your attention, your time. We want to encourage you to keep working on your business and get a SCORE mentor if you would like one. We'd also like to encourage you to come back to the next workshops in this series where we go deeper into these topics a little more. We also have more in the series, so if you're not in our email list, then by all means, if you want to be notified when we have more workshops, we have a pretty interesting series coming up in March, and we also have some workshops in February. We also want to remind you that you have access to all of our prior workshops that we've ever given, that we've recorded. I'll put that caveat on. There are two ways you can access them. The first way is you can go to score.org, as I told you earlier, and go to our chapter and say recorded webinars, and you'll see the list. And the other way is you can go to our YouTube channel at Greater Hartford SCORE. Once you're in YouTube, you just put that in the search. And we actually have a playlist called Lunch and Learn. So if you want to go to the playlist tab, you'll find all of these same type of workshops there. They're also in playlists by category. So if you want to learn about numbers, or you want to learn about marketing, or you want to know more about tools you can use for your business, they're all segregated by category as well, so that it's easier for you to search. So we encourage you to check out that channel on your own time and watch whatever is going to help you with your business, because that is our goal here today. And with that, we will end the recording.